Sweet mother of mercy.
Please don't shoot me. Some bandits came by and took us hostage.
Let's be honest guys, cowboys are pretty cool. There's just something about the Wild West that's always translated well into video game format, and the whole fast on the draw gunslinger trope has made for some pretty memorable characters. Red Dead Redemption is the only game I think I've played that managed to capture this theme so flawlessly, but aside from that, there's also the Call of Juarez series, which had something of a rocky start. And yet probably the biggest shock is that Bound in Blood is actually a pretty damn good game, and I'd say it's arguably the best game in the Call of Juarez series. The main focus of the story is around Ray McCall returning from the first game and his brothers Thomas and William. Thomas of course being the stepfather to Billy Candle, the other protagonist from the first game. Anyway, during the prologue for Bound in Blood, Ray and Thomas are fighting in the American Civil War before they disobey direct order and become deserters to head home and protect their land. However, when they return home, they find the place destroyed and have no choice but to go on the run to avoid their former commanding officer.
I take this as a personal affront.
From here they head to Mexico to look for the eponymous Gold of Juarez before things start to get a little bit complicated, with a love triangle and a few side characters shoehorned in to expand the plot. The whole notion of rebuilding their family home goes out the window, and they turn into a couple of utter dickheads that do nothing but talk shit to one another and go on about how badly they want to get laid like a couple of poon hounds.
Betsy? The Marshal's daughter? Are you out of your mind?
I already knew Ray was an asshole from having played the first game, and in this storyline he isn't exactly winning me over.
You're drunk.
I'm getting there.
Unlike the first game, however, Bound in Blood has an actual sense of humour and doesn't take things quite as seriously. There's a fair bit of banter between Ray and Thomas that's fun to listen to, and most of the voice acting is pretty good stuff, even if, as I said, both of these guys are colossal dicks for the most part. The music is great, the sound is great, and the game also looks considerably better than the prior game in almost every single way. The character models look much better, even if the animation still isn't all that good, and the outdoor environments are about twice or even 3 times the size of anything we saw in Call of Juarez. Certain levels I'd even say almost look photorealistic. It's just a gorgeous looking game at times. It's exactly what you'd expect from a sequel, and it ticks all the boxes. I mean, I did have a little bit of an issue running it in Windows 7 until I disabled my second monitor, at which point the game ran flawlessly. At the start of each chapter, you're able to choose between playing as Ray or Thomas, which will often significantly affect the way a chapter plays out. Ray's something of a bullet sponge, able to dual-wield revolvers and take a bit more damage, whereas Thomas relies on his rifle, bow, throwing knives, and rope for a more platforming-orientated playstyle. It seems Ray's a fat piece of shit that can't pull himself up a ledge to save his life, so we'll have to rely on Thomas to help him along as well. It's all just trying to reinforce the whole bond between the two brothers. Then there's a lot of moments where you're breaching a door, which is that mechanic we've seen in countless Call of Duty games where you bust a door down and everything goes all slow motion so you can shoot a bunch of people really quickly. Ray also has the best ability in the game, I think, which is where he can throw dynamite with his left hand, somehow magically lighting it despite holding a pistol in his right hand. Outside of their alternate routes during the levels, they're basically the same in terms of how they control, with one exception, during concentration mode. Now both characters have access to concentration mode, which is like a form of bullet time I guess, where time comes to a near standstill and you can take out a bunch of bad guys really quickly. This thing fills up by shooting a certain amount of enemies, though once it's filled it has a time limit, which is a bit odd, and annoyingly it resets after cinematics or scripted sequences. With Ray, you drag the crosshair across the screen and tag enemies, but with Thomas you have to kind of lurch the mouse backwards quickly as the crosshair locks onto an enemy, simulating the motion of the revolver's hammer I suppose. Either way, they're both very effective modes and fun to use. Overall though, the shooting is much better than the first game. It actually feels like you're firing a weapon now, not a pea shooter, and the aiming and hit detection feels much more cohesive. A lot of the weapons do fire very slowly, though I guess that's kind of the point given the theme and age of a lot of the guns you're using, but a lot of the better guns you get your hands on improve the basics like damage and reload time anyway. Throughout the chapters you find cash, which you can then spend buying ammunition and new weapons. Replacing your rusty rifle with a superior and eventually superb version gives the characters an actual sense of progression and makes you feel more powerful later in game. There's a few cool chapters which are essentially free roam where you can complete 3 different side tasks to earn a bit of money. Most of these just include riding around on your horse then killing a bunch of bandits. These are a nice addition, though I wish there was some sort of map to help you get around, and the lack of any consistent checkpoints during these segments can be a bit of a pain in the ass as well. A new addition to the shooting is this sort of cover mechanic where the game locks you behind an object when you crouch near it. Now this isn't as intuitive as it should be, and I found myself not using it all that much because of it. But by far, one of the weakest elements in the game is the duels, which are just horrible. A staple of any western, duels are where you and another man sort out your differences by seeing who is the fastest on the draw. This kind of thing should really be in a western game, and it's the cornerstone of the genre, and yet in Bound in Blood it's a frustrating, clunky fucking mess, mostly because they do a horrible job of explaining how it all works. All you're told in a few sentences of text is that you wait until you hear the bell, then you reach for your gun to draw it. But the game doesn't tell you anything else, like whereabouts you're actually supposed to drag the mouse to, whether or not your position and angle to your opponent has any bearing on your speed, and the first few times I managed to get my gun out of its holster, I had no idea whether or not I was controlling the crosshair either. It's just not implemented very well, and learning it becomes a real chore of trial and error. To make it even worse, they occur almost every single mission in the game, so until you get the hang of it, it becomes really frustrating and rage-inducing. Maybe it's better on the consoles with a controller or something, I don't know, but on the PC it's just a half-assed mechanic. The first opponent I had a duel with took me 15 attempts before I finally passed it. I mean, you will get better at it the more you play the game, but on the flip side they occur so frequently that it begins to lose its luster. A couple of duels throughout the campaign would have been great, and then the few you partake in would have had you really emotionally invested, but they happen so frequently it ends up being a lot less cooler than it should be. But I'll stop being a negative Nelly. Look, I still think that Bound in Blood is a far superior game to the first. It does a good job of tying the story in with the events of the first game, and the vastly improved controls and visuals really differentiate the game from its predecessor in nothing but a good way. It's a shame then, Sunny Jims, that from here on in, we're really up shit creek. Oh yes, abandon the lifeboats, women and children first, because in the next video, we're going to be taking a look at the next game in the series, Call of Juarez the Cartel.